أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم وبه نستعين والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا ونبينا وهادينا وحبيب قلوبنا والشفيع نفوسنا بالقاسم محمد وعلى أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين اللهم صل وسلم على محمد وآل محمد. For today's discussion, inshallah, I wanted to take a look at a really famous sermon as narrated by Imam Amir al-Mu'mineen alayhi salatu wassalam, sermon 209 of Nahjul Balagha, in which the Imam alayhi salam is in communication or is in conversation with a companion of his, a man by the name of Al-Ala ibn Ziyad al-Harithi, or according to other versions of this narration, a man by the name of Rabi ibn Ziyad al-Harithi, along with one of his brothers, where the Imam alayhi salam, he teaches them or he advises them with regards to how they should see and how they should perceive their role and their responsibilities living in this transient world, and not falling to its lure or not falling to its desire. It's not particularly lengthy, this conversation as narrated within Sermon 209 of Nahjul Balagha, but the same exact report with a little bit of a different variation is actually also mentioned in Kitab al-Kafi of al-Kulaini, Ridwanullahi ta'ala alayh. But for the sake of our discussion, if you'd like to follow along, we'll take a look at the version from Nahjul Balagha, which is Sermon 209, and seek toward extracting some hopefully practical and beneficial lesson for the sake of our conversation. Bi'idhnillah. So it begins, where Imam Ali alayhi salam, he leaves the city of Kufa. So this was during the time of his Khilafah. For those of you who are familiar, Imam Amir al-Mu'mineen alayhi salam, for 24 and a half some odd years, after the passing of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he lives in the holy city of Medina. And when he assumes the position of the caliphate of the Muslim community, within the first several weeks, he transitions from the city of Medina and he establishes the city of Kufa for a whole host of political and military reasons as his capital and as his home. Number one, it was militarily strategic for him to be in Iraq, particularly with all of the forces that were surrounding the Imam alayhi salam, attempting his life and the life of so many other Muslims. And number two, he also had found a lot of support from within Iraq of his loyalists within the city of Kufa in specific. Anyhow, the Imam alayhi salam, he had appointed one of his companions, a man by the name of Rabi, or in this variation of the narration, Al-Ala, as either his military general or amongst his governors in Basra. And the Imam alayhi salam had heard that this companion of his had gotten very ill. He was sick for whatever reason. And so if you read in the very beginning of this particular report, as mentioned within Nahjul Balagha, according to Sharif al-Rabi, he states that Amir al-Mu'mineen went to inquire about the health of his companion. So lesson number one, before we even start to read this conversation that takes place between these two individuals, is that the Imam alayhi salam had heard that one of his companions had fallen ill. At the very least, our religious, moral, ethical responsibility is that when we hear that someone had gotten sick, then we inquire about them, we should ask about them, we should check in to see how they're doing. And again, it doesn't sound like so deep or so spiritual, but this small gesture undoubtedly goes a really long way. Even in the famous report of the Hadith al-Kisa that we often recite, that when the Prophet ﷺ, he comes to the house of Fatima, peace and blessings be upon her, he states, O daughter of mine, O Fatima, that I am seeing some weakness within my own self. I'm not feeling so well. So what does Lady Fatima ﷺ respond? She states, U'iduka billahi ya abata min al-daf. That, oh Allah, I seek refuge when you're not well. it's really easy when someone comes and tells you about their problem, about their difficulty, about their illness, about their financial problem, that you tell them, oh, like, I'm also sick. So what difference does it make if you're sick, right? Someone tells you, I'm really, really tired. I'm not feeling so well. You say, well, I'm not feeling so well either. That's the normal response in the world that we live in. But over here we see that the, etiquette that we learn from Ahlul Bayt, peace and blessings be upon them, is that when someone from amongst their friends, from amongst their companions is not well, is going through difficulty, that not only would they just ask about them or inquire about them, but the Imam alayhi leaves Kufa to go to Basra just to go and visit his sick companion. Just one quick parenthesis, because again we want to try to extract as much as we can from this not very lengthy report. That one day it is said that there was this really close confidant of Imam Musa ibn Ja'far, the seventh Imam alayhi salatu wasalam. And for 3 days, the Imam alayhi salam hadn't seen him. And so it was the custom of the Prophet and of the Imams of Ahlul Bayt that when they would not be in the company of someone for 3 days, or they didn't see them for 3 days, that they would start to ask. So it is said that Imam Musa al-Kadhim, he asks his companions, his other students and confidants and whatnot, and he says, where is so-and-so guy? So they say that, grandson of the Messenger of God, he's not feeling well, he's ill. So Imam Musa al-Kadhim alayhi salam, he leaves his home and he goes to visit this guy. And he not scolds him, but he rebukes him a little bit. And he states, like, I'm your Imam, I'm your leader, I'm your guide. Why wouldn't you tell me? Why wouldn't you send a messenger? Why won't you figure out a way to tell me that you're sick so that I can come and be at your support? Where he was upset that he could have not been at the support of one of his companions earlier. So in other words, what we should be doing is that when we see someone going through hardship and difficulty, lesson number 1 that we learned from Imam Amir al-Mu'mineen, that he makes every effort and attempt toward, at the very least, consoling that individual who is going through difficulty and hardship, at the very least, by our words, by our visitation. Today, we don't even need to do that. At the very least, you send an email, a text message, just checking in, and you'll see again, if we were to be a recipient of that, how good that we would feel, let alone when we are the one who is sending it to somebody, just checking in to see how they're doing. It really goes a long way. Try it. So it is stated that Imam Ali alayhi salatu wasalam, he goes to visit this companion of his. Again, in Nahjul Balagha, this man is known as Al-Ala ibn Ziyad al-Harithi, though most commentators would say that it is not Al-Ala, that it is Rabi, meaning someone from his same family, maybe a brother of his, someone from his same tribe. Either way. And we don't know exactly what happens in the beginning of this conversation. We know that the Imam Ali salam came in to check in on him during his health, with regards to his health. But more than that, the Imam Ali salam, or this report, begins with the latter part of their conversation. So the Imam Ali salam, he states, "Ma kunta tasna'u bisa'ati hadhihi ad-dar fi ad-dunya." He notices that this companion of his, who again was a military general, or one of his governors, or an assistant to one of his governors, he had a really high post in the Islamic Empire under the authority of Ali alayhi salam. He notices that this guy has a really big home, and like a really beautiful home. So he says, "Oh, my brother," he says, "what are you going to do with this really, really big house?" He says, he continues, he states, "Ma kunta tasna'u bisa'ati hadhihi ad-dar fi ad-dunya." What will you do with this really large house in this transient world? Why do you have such a big home? The Imam Ali salam, even when he came to visit someone who was sick, he made sure to teach them a lesson. Salamullah alayhi. Anta ilayha fil akhirati kunta ahwaj. He says, I think that you're going to be in far more need of this house in the world beyond this one. This world, you don't need a big house. In that world, you can benefit from it. Over here, all you have to do is live in a small house, be mindful about your spending. In other words, that don't be so extravagant. وَبَلَى إِن شِئْتَ بَلَغْتَ بِهَا الْآخِرَةِ. But then the Imam Ali salam, and again, this is so beautiful. Why is everyone sitting so far? Can everyone move forward? This is so awkward for me. Can everyone move forward? All the women? It's like, I should have asked you before, I'm sorry. All the way, all the way. Why don't you guys also move in the front? There's like these 3 nice seats. It makes my experience better too. If you don't mind. Thank you guys. Don't worry. I got a new deodorant spray yesterday. Come. So the Imam alayhi salam, he tells him, ما كنت تصنع بسعة هذه الدار في الدنيا. What are you going to do with this massive home in this world? أنت إليها في الآخرة كنت أحوج. He says, you are going to be in far more need of this home in the akhirah, in the world beyond this one. وبلا إن شئت بلغت بها الآخرة. But I have a plan. I can give you the way, the method by which you can take this house to the world beyond this one. So what is so common, like in many like Muslim communities, is that when someone is doing something wrong, the easiest way is to just slam them, right? I don't know what it is, right? I don't know if it's like a cultural thing or like whatever it is. Someone is doing something wrong and you just start screaming at them. Like you see it online all the time. You see it with like religious leadership, God forbid. Someone is doing something bad and immediately they're condemned, okay? The way that the Imam alayhi salam speaks to his companion is not in condemnation until and unless he also gives them the outlet of how they should be behaving. It doesn't suffice that we tell someone that what they're doing is wrong without telling them how to make it right. You get what I'm saying? So it has to be like this two-way street. And this has to do with everything, right? In the way that you learn in the classroom, in the way that you teach your children, in all of aspects of life, it can't be such that we're only condemning without giving people some sense of instruction. This is exactly what we learn from just the method by which the Imam alayhi salam speaks. Again, we don't know the earlier part of this conversation. Likely the Imam, absolutely the Imam came with compassion, with love. He saw that one of his friends was ill. So he left from Kufa all the way to Basra, but again, he also had to teach him his role and responsibilities. So he does it in this really nice and polite and really beautiful way. So he tells him, you have this really nice big home, it's massive, it's lovely, but it's way too big, right? And it's much better for you to have, or for you to build a home that's this big, or even bigger, in the world beyond this one. But you already built this home, so I'm not telling you you need to sell it, and I'm not telling you you need to give it all in charity, but I have a way that you can take this home of yours to paradise with you. Then he states, عليه السلام, وَبَلَا إِنْ شِئْتَ بَلَغْتَ بِهَا الْآخِرَةِ تَقْرِي فِيهَا الضَّيْفِ وَتَسَلُ فِيهَا الرَّحِمِ وَتُطْلِئُ مِنْهَا الْحُقُوقِ مَطَالِئَهَا فَإِذَا أَنْتَ قَدْ بَلَغْتَ بِهَا الْآخِرَةِ. He states there are 3 things that you can do if you want to take this house from dunya to akhirah, from this world to the next world. Number 1 is that you entertain in this home guests, meaning that you invite people to come over, you spend time with them, you spend out of your own money, you purchase food, you make food for them, you give that to them. In other words, you host some gatherings whereby you're able to treat people well, okay? And this is something really, really incumbent and something really beloved in the eyes of Allah Azza wa Jal, within the sunnah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, that he would love to host guests. And we see this within the custom of all of the prophets of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That famous story that I narrate quite a bit, when Prophet Ibrahim alayhi salam, he would never eat a meal until and unless he had a guest at his home. So he would literally look for somebody to invite for every meal of the day, for a guest to eat with him. We see this within the sunnah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, that he would always look for people to come and eat with and spend time with. And we should look and love that opportunity to host, even though it's difficult, even though it's time consuming, even though sometimes it's not particularly cost effective. To do that is beloved in the eyes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So number 1, taqri fiha ad-dayf, that number 1, we entertain guests, again, in accordance with that which is bound within Islamic law, in permissible gatherings, and so on and so forth. Number 1. Number 2, وَتَسِلُوا فِيهَا الرَّحِمِ. The second way to transport this dunya to the akhirah is to utilize this home of yours to build good familial relations. If you have a sibling, a family member who is visiting from out of town, you keep them in your home, he's telling this companion of his. He says, if there are people who got into a dispute from amongst your family, bring them to your home and try to reconcile. Utilize your home to build familial relations, to treat people well from within your own family. And we know, right, that many families go through difficulties and hardship. And it's really, really important, again, and beloved in the eyes of God, to being the one individual from that family who's going to take it upon themselves toward creating opportunities for reconciliation. Again, we have hadith that tell us, for instance, that reconciling between two people is better than the performance of Hajj and Umrah. Reconciling between two people allows for us to be under the shade of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's throne on the Day of Judgment. All of these lofty hadith that tell us about the reward of just bringing people together, and particularly those within our own respective families. So number 2, وَتَسَلُوا فِيهَا الرَّحِمِ. The second way you can transport this house from dunya to akhirah is to utilize it as a means to care for your kin, for your familial relatives. And then the Imam Ali salam says the third, وَتُطْلِعُوا مِنْهَا الْحُقُوقِ مَتَالِعَهَا. And that make sure that you fulfill or you discharge all of your religious obligations according to their time and to their amount. So if you have any financial dues, if you have khums, you have zakat, you have payments that need to be made, if you have debts that need to be paid, then make sure that your home is not a burden in you doing any of that. Okay? To make sure that you are still fulfilling all of your religious duties and obligations. فَإِذَا أَنْتَ قَدْ بَلَغْتَ بِهَا الْآخِرَةِ. And if you have done that, if you're able to utilize this house for all of that benefit, then know that you can take this house from dunya to akhirah. It doesn't mean literally that house, it means a house that's better than that one. Good? This is the first part of the narration. قال له صاحبه. This companion, he then tries to change the conversation because he just got scolded. He states, يا أمير المؤمنين أشكو إليك أخي آسم ibn Ziyad. He states, O Imam Amir al-Mu'mineen, I want to complain to you about my brother Asim. قال ما له. He says, what's the matter with this guy? What's going on? The Imam, the brother says, لبس الأباء وتخلى من الدنيا قال علي به. He states that, O Amir al-Mu'mineen, he has put on a woolen cloak and he has abandoned himself from this world. So the Imam alayhi salam says, bring your brother to me. So let's break this down for just one moment. You have this one brother, Rabi ibn Harith, Rabi ibn Ziyad al-Harithi, who lives this pretty decent life. He is respected and honored. He has some really important position under the governorship of Imam Ali alayhi salam, either a military general or the governor or the assistant to the governor. He has some lofty post. And he lives in this big home. And the Imam alayhi salam tells him how to make sure that he's not getting so attached to this home by doing things that are meaningful for his akhirah. On the flip side, he has another brother. This man has a brother who has worn the woolen cloak and he has abandoned himself from this dunya. What's going on over here? During the time of Imam Ali alayhi salam, and really for the first several centuries of Islam, and sometimes even till this very day, there were personalities who sought toward demonstrating a life of piety and God consciousness by abstaining from every single physical pleasure of dunya. No food, no sleep, no intimacy, no drink. They sought toward fasting during the day, praying during the night, and they had made this they had virtually created this particular story, suggesting that this is the means for them to get closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And they had worn a woolen cloak in the heat of the summer. demonstrating to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that even in this heat, I'm going to make myself sweat more, be more hot, and devote myself in dedication and in obedience and in subservitude to you. So this brother is telling Imam Ali alayhi salam, the one who was sick, the one who has this post, he says that my brother, he has abandoned this world. So the Imam alayhi salam says, bring him to me. I want to have a conversation with him too. So what happens? So he is brought toward the Imam alayhi salatu wassalam. And he states, فَلَمَّا جَاءَ, and by the way, in the version in Kitab al-Kafi, the brother Rabi, he says, this brother of mine who has put on this cloak and has abandoned this dunya, he has made his wife upset and his kids scared, like because he doesn't spend any time with them. He's only busy praying and worshipping and so on and so forth. So this man is brought in front of the Imam alayhi salatu wasalam. فَلَمَّا جَاءَ قَالَ يَا أُدَيَّ نَفْسَهُ. He states, O enemy of yourself. In the Arabic language, the word for enemy is adu. And uday is someone who is a small enemy. So he states, you have become a minor enemy of your own self. This thought that's pervading in your mind, telling you that you need to abandon this world in its entirety, is something satanic. Meaning, be careful. لَقَدْ استهام بك الخبيث. He states that surely that the shaitan has misguided you. أما رحمت أهلك وولدك. He says, do you not have any pity? Do you not have any mercy on your wife and on your child and on your children? أترى الله أحل لك الطيبات وهو يكره أن تأخذها. He states, do you think that Allah, this is important, he says, do you think that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has made all of the pleasures of this world desirable and permissible for you, and yet you don't take them? Let me give you an example to put this in perspective. You know, sometimes in the course of our lives, someone comes and does you some nice favor, right? Someone does you a favor. And us, out of politeness, we say no, you don't have to do that for me. Someone comes and they bring you a cup of coffee, okay? And you say, no, I don't need your coffee. It's okay, I'm totally fine, you know? And we want it, and we like it, and we appreciate the gesture, but out of politeness, we're going to refuse that initial gift that they're offering us. Maybe someone brought a coffee for themselves, and then they realized that, wait a minute, I should have brought a coffee for Sheikh Faiyaz. Sahar, she came and brought a coffee, then she realizes, oh, this guy, he likes coffee, so let me not drink coffee, let me give it to him instead, right? Number one, I'd be embarrassed to take that coffee. So I say, no, I don't want it, okay? Then you insist, no, you should definitely have it. I don't want it, I want you to drink it. For my own self-respect and dignity, right, and anyone else's, more likely than not would refuse it. Is it haram for me to take her coffee though? No. Would anyone think that it's really terrible of me to accept this coffee? Maybe, right? But generally speaking, no, right? If she insists numerous times, you accept it. Over here, Imam Amir al-Mu'mineen is telling this man, Asim, he states, my friend, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has made your wife permissible for you, has made food permissible for you, has made moments of enjoyment and pleasure permissible for you, has made sleep permissible for you. Do you really think that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has created all of these things and made them halal for you, and you are going to demonstrate your arrogance in front of God, or your self-dignity or self-worth, and saying, oh Allah, no, I don't need any of this, like we do that with other people? And he's saying that, oh Allah, I know you've made all of this allowed for me, but I don't need it. He says, you're not that important. In other words, right, that we do not have that station in front of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and it's going to be too difficult in this dunya of ours for us to manage without all of those things for an extended period of time, right? We can do it for 30 days during the month of Ramadan, but after that, it's not easy, you know? It's not easy to abstain from food and from drink and from sleep and from all of the other benefits or blessings that we have in this dunya. It's too difficult. So Allah doesn't obligate it for us for 30 days. He obligates it for a set period of time, and that doesn't go beyond that. So the Imam alayhi salam, he states, أَتَرَى اللَّهَ أَحَلَّ لَكَ الطَّيِّبَاتِ. He says, Allah has made all of these like nice things for you, and He's made them permissible. I'll open up one parenthesis over here. Some funny anecdote. Maybe it's beneficial, maybe not, I have no idea. Quick tangent nonetheless. When I was traveling a few weeks ago, somebody came up to me, and he works in, finance and whatever. And he was telling me, he's like, not to like judge all people who work in finance, but there must be a lot of people in this room. He said, like, Sheikh, I have a problem. I said, what's your problem? He says that I think a lot about money. He says, I always think about making more. And he said that I'm afraid that like my attachment toward, an increase in my savings, in my 401k, in my bank account, I obsess over it sometimes. He says, is this a problem? I told him probably, right? I told him probably. If we are like so attached to it, and it's hard and it's difficult, then we need to like reconcile for ourselves, and we need to think about some strategies to kind of get over that. So he said, okay, like, so what should I do? Should I leave like the field entirely? So I said, I don't think you need to do that. I think it's about, finding like some contentment. And sometimes we need to, some of the techniques that we're taught within our hadith is to give, right? When you're so consumed with it, then you give it, right? And you give it until it hurts, because it's not easy to give something that you're so consumed by. And then he was like being really hard on himself, He was like, but I do give a lot. I give to this organization, to this institution, and I give this much money, and this really significant percentage. And mashallah, he does. And he says, in addition to that, to try to get myself like away from it, I try to make sure that I distribute to like my family, like overseas, and to my own family over here, and I don't neglect them. And I do all of these different projects and so on and so forth. And mashallah, he's a really generous guy. He said, in addition to that, I started like devoting myself like more time toward my prayers. I started fasting these amount of days. He's really making this really strong concerted attempt, during the course of his life to not be so attached to this dunya. And then after he's explaining to me all of the steps he's taking toward breaking all of the shackles of attachment, I told him, I said, look, from what you're telling me, you're making like you're doing all of the right things, And slowly that attachment will break, and inshallah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is testing you like from all of your wealth and all of your success, and you're doing the right thing. So he's like, no, but I can't sleep at night. I said, listen, started to get concerned about this guy. He's doing so much. I told him, you can't like start neglecting yourself or your family either. You're allowed to live in accordance with your standards. So he's like, give me like some advice. So I told him, okay, my friend. I said, listen, in our religion, everything's haram, right? You can't eat this food. You can't do this, you can't do that. I said, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave us money, right? He gave us, this guy who's really interested in cars. I was like, oh, you want to drive a fast car? You can drive a fast car, it's fine, what's the problem, As long as you're not so attached to it that you don't do all of the other things, okay? So in other words, the Imam Ali salam is telling him, hey, my friend, he said, you have all of this. You have property, you have home, you have family, you have access to food. It's not that you don't have any of these things. You have all of these blessings that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given you. And yet you're telling yourself that, no, I want to abandon all of them, for your own self to the neglect of your family. It doesn't work like that. He states, أَتَرَى اللَّهَ أَحَلَّ لَكَ الطَّيِّبَاتِ وَهُوَ يَكْرَهُ أَن تَأْخُذَهَا. He states, do you believe that if you use these things, which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has made lawful for you, that He would dislike you, He would be upset with you? Impossible. And then he states, Inna Allah anta ahwanu ala Allahi min dhalik. He says, you are too unimportant. You are too insignificant. We're a servant of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Do not think that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala needs that from you. He needs for you to fulfill your duties and your obligations, and that which is permissible for you is permissible for you. And now listen to this guy's response. He's confused. He thought he was doing the right thing. He was abstaining from food, abstaining from drink, abstaining from the pleasures of dunya. And he states, Ya Amir al-Mu'mineen, هذا أنت في خشونة ملبسك وجشوبة مأكلك. He states, Oh Amir al-Mu'mineen, he says, you're scolding me? He says, you are scolding me? He says, look at your clothes and look at your food. How does Ali eat and how does Ali dress? It stated that Imam Amir al-Mu'mineen alayhi salatu wasalam, that the Imam salamullah alayhi, he would eat bread that was so rough, that was so coarse, that was so hard, that was so stale, that he literally needed to break it on his knee because it was too difficult for him to break with his hands. The strength of Ali alayhi salatu wasalam. Still, one day it said that the Imam, during his Khilafah, he was sitting with all of his other ministers and his governors in Kufa, and they had like their meal spread, and there was one particular like area that had a stamp or a sticker or the name of Ali alayhi salam on it. Basically, in our language, it said like, "Don't touch. This is like Ali's food," you know. You know, probably they wonder like, you know, he's the leader of the Muslim world. Probably has like a nice steak dinner, right? And everyone else has to eat, you know, chicken, right? And they all gather around, and then Imam Hassan alayhi salam brings the food of Imam Ali to the head of the table, or whatever was the equivalent of the head of the Imam Ali would sit on the floor. What am I kidding? And he like unpacked it, and while everyone else was eating like some decent food, the Imam alayhi salam was eating this dark, coarse, rough, you know, piece of bread. And one of the governors looked toward Imam al-Hassan alayhi salam, and he states, you know, like, "Oh Hassan, like, why don't you get your father some, like, you know, some butter or something, right? Why don't you make your father's like bread a little bit less stale, like less hard?" To which he like smiles back at this companion of theirs, and he said, "You don't know my dad, like, do you? Right? No matter what we do, he won't permit us to go near his food." And they would ask the Imam alayhi salam, like, "Why do you eat this? You know, why do you eat such food like this? You have a right to, at the very least, eat in accordance with, you know, who you are. You know, you don't need to eat food like this. You don't need to dress in clothing like this one." Many of you are familiar with that anecdote when the Imam alayhi salam, he goes out into the marketplace, or he tells his companion Qambar, his servant Qambar, to go out into the suq and buy him like you know, 2 pieces of clothing. He says, "Buy one for you and buy one for me." And so Qambar, he goes and he buys like this really, really nice shirt for the Imam, and he buys some really, really, you know, not nice shirt for himself in accordance with what his standards were. He brings it back to the Imam alayhi salam, and the Imam gives him the nicer one, and he keeps the not as nice one. And he states, "Oh Amir al-Mu'mineen, Commander of the Faithful, you are the leader of the Muslim world. I'm your servant. Why should I be wearing the nice one?" He says, "No, this is befitting for my standard, and you should be wearing this." So this man, Asim, right, who's now being condemned for abstaining from the world, he's wondering, what am I getting in trouble for? He says, exactly what I'm doing, "O Ali." He said, "I'm taking your example. You know, you're the one who eats like this. You're the one who dresses like this. You're the one who prays like this. You're the one. What am I doing wrong? You know, go back and scold my brother for his big house." He's probably thinking. Of course, he didn't say that. This is for my own commentary. Sorry. Bad joke, I'm sorry. قال, it's okay, thank you. قال, the Imam alayhi salam, he states, "Wayhak." He says, "Watch yourself." He says, "Inni lastu ka'ant." He says, "Me and you, we're not the same." Inna Allah ta'ala farada ala a'immat al-adl an yuqaddiru anfusahum bidha'afat al-nas kayla yatabayyagha bil-faqiri faqra. He states, "Woe upon you. Me and you, we're not the same. I'm not like you." He says, "For surely Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has made it an obligation on the just leaders, on the a'imma, on the imams, such that they should maintain themselves at the level of the lowest of people, so that the poor never cry over their poverty." Meaning that no one will ever say that, "Look at Ali, he has this and this and this, and I live in poverty." Meaning that he had assumed this position of leadership, so at the very least, he never wants to make a differentiation between himself, salamullah alayh, and the most poor within his community. And by the way, a lot of times people, they ask, like, did Ali even have like money? Did Ali even have wealth? You know, he is the leader of the Muslim world, right? He is Khalifat al-Muslimin. In Islamic law, the taxes that we distribute, at least under the time of the Prophet and under the time of Ali alayhi salam, these governors and these ministers who would work under the government, they would be salaried. They would have a right to take payment. The judges in the Islamic court, they have a right to take payment, and so on and so forth. Imam Ali alayhi salam, as history is a testimony to, never took one penny from the public treasury. He said that I have my own earnings and I will never take one penny from the treasury of the Muslims. Meaning that my money will be redistributed to the poor. Salamullah alayhi. How did the Imam alayhi salam make money? We said before that after the passing of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, for 24 and a half years, almost 25 years, he virtually lives in a sense of isolation, where he distanced himself from the political elite, and he would do what he did with his closest companions and confidants in terms of teaching them, in terms of training them, in terms of commentating on the Quran, and so on and so forth. But the Imam alayhi salam, when he was younger, his job used to be to dig wells. And he worked for a Jewish merchant within Medina, who he would dig wells across the city of Medina. After he had gained that skill during the course of these 24 to 25 years, he would leave the city of Medina and go toward the outskirts of the city of Medina at a city known as Yanbu', which still exists today. And the Imam alayhi salam would start to irrigate that land, and he would dig wells in that land. We have a principle within Islamic law. It states, al-ardu liman ahyaha. If there is a barren piece of land that no individual owns, but it's the government, it's under government ownership, or it's under no one knows who owns it, and for decades no one has utilized it. Maybe in New York City you can't find that. You can't find one speck of land that no one owns, right? Either some realtor owns it, either Jared Kushner owns it, right? Or the government owns it, right? You can't find that. The Imam alayhi salam would look for areas in the outskirts, in the middle of the desert, and he would start to dig wells within these regions. And the principle within Islamic law suggests that if this is land that no one lives in and is totally barren, if you start to build on it, you have the right to own it. So the Imam alayhi salam began to dig wells. For these 25 years, he worked really, really hard. And he began to plant palm trees. And from the profits of those dates and so on and so forth, he made wealth. Till the time of Imam Zainul Abidin alayhi salam, when, this is a quick parenthesis for your own benefit, after the Battle of Karbala, Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam, after his martyrdom, Imam Zainul Abidin returns back to Medina. And so much of the life of the Imam alayhi salam was in between Yanbu and Medina, because he would go back and caretake all of that land that Imam Ali that he had inherited from his grandfather Imam Ali alayhi salatu wassalam. And the Imam alayhi salam, the line of the Imam were very wealthy because of this investment and the time that Imam Ali alayhi salatu wassalam had put in. Anyhow, so Imam Amir al-Mu'mineen would never take one penny from this public treasury. So he states again, Inna Allah Ta'ala farada ala a'immat al-adli and yuqaddiru anfusahum bidha'afat an-nas. He states that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has made it an obligation upon me that I should live a standard which is as the weakest and as the poorest of the people of my community. Kayla yatabayyagha bil-faqiri faqra. So that no one from those in the lower socioeconomic class ever for a moment feels that they're not worthy, that they're not good enough, that they can't be someone who comes to me or speaks to me or seeks help from me, or so on and so forth. So from this we learn a variety of different lessons. From the first part of the report, when the Imam alayhi salam is talking to the brother of Asim, he tells him that all of this stuff that you have, this massive home, this wealth, this property, it's all fine. Number one, provided you don't get so consumed with it and attached to it. And number two, that you know how to utilize the blessings that you've been afforded as a means to going or taking it with you to the world beyond this one. And he gives these three advices. Number one, if you have a big home, make sure you entertain guests. Number two, if you have a big home, make sure that you utilize it for your family and to mend kinship ties. And number 3, make sure that you don't forget your religious duties and responsibilities. And then, when he speaks to the younger brother, he condemns him even more. And he states that this thought that you have of abstinence entirely from dunya is also a problem. And don't compare yourself to Ali. You have roles, you have responsibilities. Doing that which is permissible is encouraged, is beloved, provided, again, that you, provided that what it is that you do does not infringe on the rights of your family, of your children, so on and so forth, and that you are within the bounds of Islamic law and of Sharia. And I'll conclude with this famous report from the Imam Ali salam as well. He states, salamullah alayhi, ليس الزهد أن لا يملكك شيئا إن الزهد أن لا تملكك شيء. He states that surely abstinence from this world is not such that you do not own anything. It's okay to have things. It's okay to have nice things. But the idea is that you do not allow for any of your things to own you. Again, to not be so attached that that is the be-all, end-all, ultimate objective to our world. And that's the hard part. And it's a lifetime battle and a lifetime struggle. But if we see ourselves in those moments whereby we feel so connected and so attached to our property, to our wealth, to these things that we have, or it's the only thing that is consuming our minds, then again, like we said, there are multiple spiritual practices that we can engage in. Amongst them is to give, and to give until it hurts, like I said before, meaning out of your wealth or whatever it might be. Number 2, fasting. Fasting on the 13th, 14th, 15th of every month, for instance, every lunar month is recommended. If we can't do that, then on the 15th of every month, for instance, at the very least. And if we can't do that, then to abstain how much we eat and how much we drink, and to be mindful of that, number 2. And number 3, to perform the night prayer, to perform tahajjud, to perform salatul layl. To wake up in the middle of the night is really, really difficult. And it's really, really challenging. And sometimes that moment, it doesn't have to be every day. It could start once a month, right? And then you can build yourself to twice a month. And then you can build yourself to once a week. That moment when you are in total communication and conversation only between you and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, sometimes it makes us forget about all of the attachments and distractions that we have of this dunya, and allows for us to be more self-aware and at the same time more God-conscious as well. With that, we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for tawfiq. Walhamdulillah rabbil alameen. Wa sallallahu ala sayyidina wa nabiyyina Muhammad wa alihi at-tayyibin at-tahirin.
اللهم صل على محمد
اللهم صل على محمد.